Ask yourself why you did something today. Anything, why you snapped at that person, why you chose the thing you chose, why you feel the way you feel about someone, and notice how fast the answer comes. Instantly, smoothly, with a kind of quiet authority. Of course, you know why you did it. You were there. You are the world's leading expert on yourself, the one person with the backstage pass to your own motives. That feeling that you have privileged, direct access to the real reasons behind your own behavior is one of the most convincing feelings a human being has. It is the bedrock of your sense of being a self at all. And it is to a degree that should genuinely unsettle you, an illusion. Because a set of experiments on people with a very unusual brain condition reveals something strange and a little frightening about the part of you that generates those confident explanations. It revealed that this part of you will, without hesitation, without the slightest flicker of doubt, invent an explanation that is completely false, present it to you as the obvious truth, and it will do this constantly, and you will believe it every single time. There is a storyteller living in your head, narrating your life, explaining your choices, telling you who you are, and it is making a great deal of it up as it goes. The story starts with a very particular kind of patient. In the mid 20th century, some people with severe uncontrollable epilepsy underwent a radical surgery to stop seizures from spreading across the brain. Surgeons cut the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres, and lets them talk to each other. The operation worked. The seizures stopped, and the patient seemed in ordinary life completely normal. But a young neuroscientist named Michael Gazzaniga, working with Roger Sperry, who would win a Nobel Prize for this, realized something remarkable. These people now had two hemispheres that could no longer communicate with each other. Two halves of a brain, side by side, cut off. And that meant that in a laboratory, you could show something to just one hemisphere, keeping the other completely in the dark, and see what happened. And here is the crucial fact that makes everything else work. In most people, the ability to speak, to put things into words, lives almost entirely in the left hemisphere. So the left half of the brain does the talking, which means that when the right half of the brain saw something or did something, the talking half, the left, often had no idea why. And what Gazzaniga discovered when he exploited this is one of the most important findings in the history of the study of the mind. Here is one of the simplest versions. Gazzaniga would flash a written instruction, the word walk, but only to the patient's right hemisphere, the silent one. And the patient would stand up and begin to walk across the room. Then Gazzaniga would ask him, casually, "Why are you getting up?" Now remember, the half of the brain that is doing the speaking never saw the word walk. It has no idea why the body has stood up. So what does it say? Does it say, "I honestly have no idea, my body just did that on its own"? It does not. Not once. Instead, the patient answers immediately and comfortably, "Oh, I'm just going to get a Coke." Sit with that. The talking part of the brain was faced with a behavior it could not explain, and rather than admit ignorance, it instantly manufactured a reason, a plausible little story. "I'm thirsty, I'm getting a drink," and it delivered that story with complete sincerity. The man was not lying. He fully believed he had stood up to get a Coke. His brain had generated a false explanation for his own action and then handed it to his consciousness labeled as the simple truth, and he had no way whatsoever of telling that it was invented. But the experiment that truly reveals the machine is more elaborate, and once you understand it, you will not think about your own mind the same way again. Gazzaniga showed a split brain patient two different images at the same time, one to each hemisphere. To the left hemisphere, the talking one, He showed a picture of a chicken claw. To the right hemisphere, the silent one, he showed a picture of a snow scene, a wintry landscape. Then he laid out a set of cards with various images and asked the patient to point at a matching one with each hand. The patient's right hand, controlled by the left brain that saw the chicken claw, pointed to a chicken. Perfectly logical. And the patient's left hand, controlled by the right brain that saw the snow, pointed to a shovel. Also perfectly logical. You need a shovel for snow. So far, so good. Both hemispheres did this sensible thing. But now Gazzaniga asked the question that cracks the whole mind open. He asked the patient out loud, so the talking left hemisphere had to answer, "Why did you point to the shovel?" And here is the problem. The talking hemisphere has no idea about the snow. It never saw it. As far as it knows, the only thing on the screen was a chicken claw. It is now looking down and seeing its own hand pointing at a shovel, and it cannot explain why. And once again, it does not say, "I don't know." Instead, in a fraction of a second, it builds a bridge. The patient says with total confidence, "Oh, that's easy. The chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed." Do you see what just happened? The real reason for the shovel was the snow, a fact the talking brain had no access to at all. But rather than sit in that uncertainty, it took the one clue it did have, the chicken, and it wove a smooth, logical, utterly false story that connected the shovel to the chicken. And it experienced that invented story as a simple memory of its own reasoning. There was no lie, no hesitation, no sense of making anything up. From the inside, it just felt like knowing why you did something. Gazzaniga gave this a name. He called it the interpreter. He proposed that the left hemisphere contains a system whose whole job is to take everything the brain and body are doing, all the actions and feelings and impulses that bubble up from processes we have no conscious access to, and to weave them continuously into a single coherent story. A running narrative of what is happening and why, and above all, who I am. And the interpreter's absolute priority is not accuracy, it is coherence. When it does not have the real reason for something, it does not leave a blank. It fills the gap with the most plausible story it can build instantly, and presents that story to you as the truth. Now, you might be tempted to file this away as a strange quirk of people with damaged brains. That would be a serious mistake, because the split brain did not create the interpreter. It just made it visible. It separated the storyteller from its source of information so we could finally catch it in the act. But that storyteller is running in your head, right now, with both hemispheres perfectly intact. And when researchers went looking for it in ordinary people, they found it everywhere. In a classic study, psychologists laid out a row of items and asked people to choose the one they thought was the best quality. What the people did not know was that all the items were completely identical. There was no best one. And yet people chose, and they chose overwhelmingly the item on the far right, a well-known quirk of how we scan a row. But here is the part that matters. When asked why they chose that one, nobody said, "I don't know." They all looked the same. Instead, every person confidently pointed to some superior quality of the item, its texture, its color, its feel. They invented a reason, and when the researchers asked directly, did the position of the item, its being on the right, have anything to do with your choice? People looked at them as though they were crazy. No, of course not. I chose it because it was better. The real cause position was invisible to them. The interpreter had supplied a reason and they believed it completely. It gets stranger. In an experiment on what is now called choice blindness, Researchers showed people pairs of photographs of faces and asked them to pick the one they found more attractive. Then, using a sleight of hand with the cards, the experimenter handed the person the photo they had not chosen, the rejected face, and asked them to explain why they picked it. And most people did not notice the switch. They took the face they had actually rejected and they proceeded to explain in detail why they had chosen it. Oh, I liked her smile. She seemed more approachable. I've always liked dark hair. Confidently justifying a choice they never made for a face they had actually turned down. The interpreter did not care that the underlying fact had been swapped. It received a face and a request for a reason, and it did what it always does. It produced a reason, smooth and sincere and entirely fabricated. And if the reasons you give in the moment are confabricated, you might hope that at least the raw material, your memories, the actual past your story is built on, is solid ground. It is not, because the psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent a career showing that memory is not a recording that you play back. It is a reconstruction that you rebuild every time from fragments, and it is astonishingly easy to corrupt. In her most famous work, she and her colleagues managed to plant entirely false childhood memories into ordinary adults, simply by having a trusted family member suggest an event that never happened, like being lost in a shopping mall as a child. And around a quarter of people did not just accept it, they remembered it. They filled it in with vivid, specific detail, the fear, what the place looked like, the kind stranger who helped them, none of which ever occurred. And some of them, even after being told it was fabricated, refused to believe it hadn't happened because it now felt exactly like a real memory. So, the interpreter is not only inventing your reasons in the present, it is drawing on a past that is itself, in part, a reconstruction. Editable, suggestible, and sometimes simply made up. The story of your life is being narrated by an unreliable narrator working from an unreliable archive. So let us put this together and let it land. Because the conclusion is genuinely vertiginous. The you that you experience as the author of your life, the coherent narrator who explains your reasons and defends your choices and tells the ongoing story of who you are and why you do what you do. That narrator is, to a significant degree, an interpreter running after the fact. Your actual motives are largely generated by processes beneath your awareness, in the vast dark machinery of the brain that you have no window into. And the confident, seamless story you tell about those motives is very often not a readout of the truth. It is a reconstruction, a plausible guess built from the few clues the interpreter happens to have, and then experienced as certain knowledge. You are not the chief executive who makes the decision in the boardroom and then issues the memo. You are much closer to the press secretary who is handed the decision after it has already been made, walks out to the podium and explains it to the world with total confidence as though they had been in the room where it happened. And the press secretary is extremely good at their job. So good that they have even fooled themselves. Now, I have to be careful here because it would be easy to take this too far, and the overstatement is its own kind of falsehood. This does not mean you are a hollow puppet with no self, or that everything you believe about yourself is a lie, or that self knowledge is simply impossible. That is not the lesson, and it is not true. The interpreter is not a malfunction. It is one of the most important things your brain does. That relentless story weaving is exactly what allows you to be a coherent person at all, to learn from your past, to plan a future, to hold a stable identity together across time. A mind with no interpreter, no narrator would not be liberated. It would be a chaos of disconnected moments, not a person. And sometimes, often even, the story it tells is roughly accurate. The point is not that the narrative is worthless. The point is that the narrative is a construction, not a transcript. It is built not recorded. And it is far more fallible, far more invented, and crucially, far more revisable than it feels from the inside. Because here is where this stops being unsettling and starts quietly to set you free. If the self is a story, then it is a story that can be rewritten, and that changes everything. Start with the gift of humility. Once you know about the interpreter, you can hold your own explanations of yourself more loosely. The next time you are absolutely certain that you did something for a noble reason, that your anger was purely righteous, that your choice was purely rational, you can pause and remember that the part of you generating that certainty is the same part that confidently explained a shovel with a chicken shed. And instead of defending your story to the death, you can get curious about what the real reason might have been. That curiosity, that willingness to not fully trust your own press secretary, is the beginning of actual self knowledge, and it is available only to people who know the narrator is fallible. Then there is the gift of grace toward others. Every person who ever hurt you and then gave you an infuriating, self serving explanation for what they did, they were very often not simply lying. Their interpreter handed them that story too, and they believed it as completely as you believe yours. Everyone is running the same software. Everyone is the sincere, self justifying press secretary of a government they never actually get to see. That does not excuse harm, but it can dissolve a certain kind of bitterness, the kind that assumes everyone who wronged you knew exactly what they were doing and why. And the largest gift is this: you are not sentenced to the story you inherited about yourself. So much of what we take to be fixed, permanent identity, I am just an anxious person. I always sabotage the good things. I am not the kind of person who can do that. This is simply who I am. All of that is the interpreter too. It is narrative, not bedrock. And narrative can be revised. Not by lying to yourself, but by understanding that the story you have been told about who you are, even the story you tell yourself, was assembled often in the dark, often from incomplete clues, often by an interpreter doing its best with very little. Which means it is not the final, authoritative truth of you. It is a draft, and the story you tell about yourself is not just a record of what you do. It quietly shapes what you do next. Change the story honestly and slowly, and you change the person. So, the next time an explanation for your own behavior arrives instantly, effortlessly, with that warm glow of total certainty, I want you to notice it, and I want you to hold it a little more lightly, because that confidence was never evidence that it was true. It is just the interpreter doing the only thing it knows how to do, which is to make you feel like a coherent person who understands exactly why they are the way they are. The truth is stranger, and I think kinder. You may never fully know why you do what you do. No one does. The final, authoritative version of you was never actually written by anyone, not even by you. And if the story of who you are has been getting made up quietly this whole time, then it was never a prison and you were never trapped inside it. The narrator has been improvising your entire life, so you might as well pick up the pen gently and have a say in what it makes up next. If this is the kind of thing you want to keep thinking about, I have written 2 books that go further. The Shadow You Carry, about the parts of yourself the narrator leaves out of the story, the ones you have never been told about, because the storyteller finds them inconvenient. And on Wanting, about why we chase what we chase and who is actually writing those wants in the first place. The links are in the description whenever you are ready.